So, welcome everyone to a new series being sponsored by Pet Perfect, where we talk to people in the entire spectrum of the pet industry. And today we have with us Dr. Sasha Pinto, who has graciously agreed to be our first interviewee on this platform. So, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're very busy, but you have taken time, so we're very grateful for you. And before we get started, if you could take a few minutes to just introduce yourself, tell exactly what you do and where you are right now.
Hi everyone, so I'm Dr. Sasha Pinto. I studied my BVSC, that's Bachelor's of Veterinary Science in Pondicherry, and I'm from Goa. So currently I've moved back to Goa and I've been practicing for the past, say, 4.5 years. And I'm just in the process of starting my own clinic. But up until now, for 4 years, I was basically doing house calls. So that's a little bit about me.
Got it. And usually, when it comes to choosing your career path, let's say for engineering, we just go into it and it's nothing great as to why we chose it, right? But when it comes to veterinary, so I'm curious as to why did you choose to become a vet? Is this always something you wanted to do? At what point did you realize you want to become a veterinarian?
So coming back to your initial thing about engineering, I think that's not something you don't randomly choose. That's something also that your parents kind of make you choose, because back in the day, that was the only thing that they knew about. So similarly, with me, it's not that my parents forced me or anything, but it's that I've grown up in the environment. So my dad is also a veterinarian, and he's been practicing in the field for 40 plus years. So growing up in a household where your father is a vet, a government vet, you get to be exposed to a lot of animals, regardless of what species, what size, because being in the government also, you do get a lot of exposure to wild animals as well. So honestly, I don't remember a day in our house where we did not have a pet, or not, if not a pet, if we didn't have something that we had to nurture or something that we had to, nourish, or something that we had to help to gain their strength. So I think that obviously had a lot to do with it. But also my parents keep telling me that apparently from the time that I could probably walk or talk, that there was, if I had to be given like an animal, or if I had to choose between a human and an animal, I would still choose the animal back then. So even when people ask me nowadays, they're like, why did you choose to become a vet? Why did you choose to do MBBS? Like, it's like, unfortunately, in people's minds, it's held still in higher regard than veterinarians. But the simple answer, which a lot of people may not like, but the simple answer that I tell people is, I would rather save an animal than a human. So that's probably why I did veterinarian. From the beginning, there's nothing else that I knew that I even had a doubt that I wanted to do.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I think a lot of people can share that sentiment about caring for an animal more than a human. So that's completely fine and understandable. Alright, so what we have done is, as you know, we have a community called Pet Perfect, an app, and we have taken down a bunch of questions people keep asking, and we have split them into two categories, one related to healthcare and one related to food, right? So I'll ask a few questions on this, and then we'll move to that, and you can answer them one by one. So the first question, I think there's a lot of misconception where people, when it comes to this, is regarding spaying and neutering. So what are your thoughts on spaying and neutering, and do you think that every pet parent should get their pets spayed and neutered?
So this is actually a bit of a tricky question, because a lot of people think that a pet or an animal should experience the feeling of motherhood or fatherhood. Honestly, it doesn't matter, because if you go to see, once your animal does give birth, you are anyway robbing them of that child. Like, you're giving them for adoption, or you're selling them, or something or the other. So I think that, honestly, they don't actually get this feeling of motherhood. But if you actually go to see, and if you're actually thinking of the sentiments of the animal, I think it's a bit more hurtful to rob someone of their child, rather than, if they don't know what they're missing, then they're not missing it at all. So, but that is more of on the sentimental value of what people think, But actually, in actual fact, spaying and neutering is, of course, highly recommended, because it does prolong the life of an animal. Okay, so some people will be like, but the life of an animal is very short anyway. For you, 1 year may not seem long, but for them it is. It does prolong the life of an animal to a certain extent. It does prevent them from getting into fights due to the different hormones and the pheromones and everything. It, of course, does in certain cases, like, for example, if it's a female, it prevents them from getting any uterine infections. If it's a male, it helps them to prevent them from getting any prostate enlargements and so on. So if you maybe by mistake, your pet does mate, and you are at that place where you're like, okay, I don't want to neuter my pet right now and abort the fetuses. Okay, fine, but after that, it is a very, very short window that you do get to actually neuter your pet after that, because there's the time where they're lactating, where they're coming back into heat, and then again they might get pregnant. So the best is to neuter them before they do get pregnant. And if you are a person wherein your animals say they are at risk of getting pregnant early, then it's best to do their spaying and neutering by like 6-7 months max. If you are in a household where your pet is not at risk of getting pregnant, then I personally suggest wait till at least they're 1.5-year-old or so, because till then at least their growth is complete. All of their hormones basically do the entire work that they're supposed to do to mature that entire pet, not only sexually but otherwise as well. So it's spaying and neutering is very important.
Got it. So I think a lot of people are also worried about, because it's an operation. And do you think there's any harm or risk when it comes to spaying and neutering your pet?
One of the major harms and risks, obviously, which you have to also write your own risk certificate for, is basically your anesthesia. But again, when you go to a reliable vet, or even if you go to a doctor for yourself, you're basically putting your life into their hands. So that is one of the major risks that comes with during and before the surgery. But after that, it also comes into play for the pet parent. You have to take care of that pet for at least a week. Yes, a lot of people don't use antibiotics post-surgery. A lot of people say, oh, it's fine. You just leave the animal and they'll be fine. But it's still the responsibility of the pet parent to make sure that the wound heals well, to make sure that the pet isn't, in an environment where there is a lot of infection that could be caused. So I think your main risks here are just your anesthesia part, which is more of like a technical part which involves the veterinarian, not really you. So there's not really anything that you can do about that. But the post-operative part is something that you can probably really have a hand in and, help your pet to basically heal without any pain and faster.
Got it. So basically, to summarize it, it's always good to get your pets spayed and neutered.
Yes.
Got it. All right. So I think moving on the same lines when it comes to performing these actions for your pets, let's talk about vaccinations. And I think a most common question is, how early should you start vaccinating your puppy, and how do you go about it?
So this is a very good question, actually, because I have a lot of clients that come to me with dogs that are above a year, and they're like, oh, we have to give the vaccine. I'm like, you had to give the vaccine. Now it's a bit too late, but we'll still do it. So ideally, when a pet is around, so for the antivirals, that's the 7-in-1, the 9-in-1, the cat flu, ideally your benchmark is 45 days. So once they're 45 days, or in other words 6 weeks, you can give this vaccine. And the anti-rabies is normally given after you're 3 months of age. But again, this has two ways of looking at it. So I don't know if you all have heard of Mission Rabies. It's this big organization that is here in Goa. It's a UK sponsored, part government sponsored thing. So I realized that they were vaccinating even tiny pups. So I obviously, researched about it and spoke to them about it as well. So it's very interesting when you think of rabies. We vaccinate above 3 months of age when you know for a fact that the mother has been vaccinated too. Because in that case, when the pup or the kitten has suckled from the mother, then some of the antibodies are into them. So it's fine to vaccinate at 3 months of age, because then, the blood-brain barrier, okay, those are a bit too technical things. But basically by 3 months of age, then once your antibodies from your mom starts depleting, that's when we vaccinate. But in cases of stray pups, stray kittens, where you're not sure if the mother is vaccinated, where you're not even sure if the mother was healthy to begin with, it is better to vaccinate them for anti-rabies also early by, say, 6 weeks. Ideally, nothing should be given before 6 weeks unless you're giving the puppy DP. That's a new vaccine that's come up especially for parvo and distemper. But the earliest you can vaccinate a dog is 45 days. For a normal vaccine, puppy DP is lower than that. And then you have to give the booster. So a lot of people give one vaccine and then they think that's it. You have to give the booster because this is the first vaccine your dog is ever receiving, or your cat. So you need to boost those antibodies. You need to give a booster. Some vets give one booster, some vets give 2 boosters. And then after that, you have to give every year.
Got it. And moving in terms of like vaccination, I think there's one thing people often forget, and it's deworming. And I think that's mainly because as humans, also not a lot of people do take deworming tablets in general. So I think the main question is, why is it so important to deworm your pets, and how often should you deworm them?
So deworming is actually, like you said, one of the most overlooked thing that people don't do. So a lot of people think that, oh, by drinking milk, I'm going to get worms. It's not like that. There are eggs, there are oocysts, there are larvae everywhere, and being pups, being on the ground, being suckling constantly, or even babies, humans, you do tend to get or ingest these worms, eggs, and everything. So deworming them is most important in young ones, because what the worm does is basically it attacks itself on your intestine and it sucks your blood. So when you don't deworm, especially when you're young, so imagine the size of a pup is so small, and the worm itself will probably be so long. So imagine 10 of those in a pup. It's going to be sucking a lot of blood. So there is this condition called worm load, wherein there's so many of worms, the pup is so loaded with worms that they actually make the puppy anemic, as in they suck all the blood out of it, they become dehydrated, and you can actually die from such a condition. So why we recommend always deworming before your vaccine, at least before your first vaccine, is because supposing there are so many worms in your pup or your kitten's body, there's no immunity left in that little thing. So once you introduce the vaccine is the virus that you're still introducing. Your body can't fight the vaccine itself. So it is dangerous to vaccinate an undewormed pup. So that's why deworming is one of the most important things.
Got it. And unlike vaccinations, can pet parents deworm their dogs themselves, or is it recommended to come to a vet for that?
They can deworm their pups themselves. So a lot of people ask me, and I always tell them on the phone itself to do it. So you had asked me earlier and I forgot to mention it. So when your pup is below 3 months old, you have to deworm every 15 days. Between 3 to 6 months old, deworm every month. 6 months to 12 months, deworm every 3 months. And after 12 months, every 3 to 6 months, you can deworm them. As you go above in age, your frequency of deworming decreases, and as well as the type of dewormer that you use can change. So when you're a pup, it's best to, of course, again, go to your vet or call up your vet and ask them what dewormer should I use. But ideally, you use a puppy dewormer or a kitten dewormer. That is, it's a liquid. So normally on most dewormers, it's 1 ml per kg, and it's very simple. You just have to hold your pup. And you don't have to open the mouth. A lot of people struggle, they try to open the mouth. You don't have to open the mouth of your pup. You just open the cheek pouch, you put the syringe in, and or a dropper, better, and you just put a little. So you never squirt it straight in the mouth. You put it here so that the pup or the kitten itself licks it in on by themselves. You don't want to choke the puppy or the kitten. So you want to put it very slowly. Now when it comes to tablets, there are different ways. So what I normally recommend is you crush the tablet. You can mix it with these things called creamy treats. Just rub it on the mouth of the cat or on the paws of the cat, and they drink it. Or for dogs or even for cats, you can crush it, mix it with a little liver paste, and they have it, they wallop it.
So I think we've covered most of the healthcare and most common questions we have seen in our app. So let's move to the food-based questions, right? And I think, again, this is a very common one. So can you feed your dog only processed food for the entire life? Is it fine to do so, and what are the risks involved if you only feed them processed foods?
So again, now there's a difference between dogs and cats, but in general, processed foods they're advertised as wholesome foods, but they're not really, because a lot of it is just fillers. So for example, soybean, they are known as fillers. So they basically just kind of take up space. They make the product look bigger. They make the product they make you feel like you're full, like you've eaten a lot, but they actually have not much nutrition. So also processed foods, whether it is dry food, a lot of people say, oh, I don't feed my cat or my dog dry food, I feed wet pouches as well. It doesn't matter. It's still not really water content. It's still a lot of salts. It's still a lot of preservatives. It's still processed, dehydrated, prepared food. So whether you feed them dry food, whether you feed them wet food, it doesn't matter, because what happens is when your pet eats this, there's also a certain amount of water that they require to compensate the loss of the water that they're getting while eating this. And it's not that you can be like, okay, my pet has eaten this much and he's going to drink this much. He won't drink that much. He will drink as much as he wants, which is sometimes not enough to balance it out. So in the long run, when you only feed your pet processed food, dry food, wet food, whatever it is, they do tend, of course, this can happen to any other animal as well. I'm not saying that it's only pets who eat processed food, but they do tend to have a higher risk of getting kidney issues or urinary tract infections, or of late we've been seeing a lot of bladder stones as well. Ideally, if, of course, out of convenience now, a lot of us do have processed food in our house. So I recommend, well, okay, in the morning, say, out of convenience, because you don't want to get up and cook for yourselves and the pet, you can put a little bit of processed food, but never fill the bowl entirely and leave it there. A lot of people do that. They keep the bowl for the entire day. That's very wrong. So you put a little bit, you have to learn your own pet. So if you feel your pet eats this much in the morning, then you make that a schedule that they eat only this much in the morning. And if they've left, take away the food, because you need to make them build an appetite again for lunch. And then throughout the day, lunch, dinner, when you actually have time, when you can prepare something previously, it's best to give them natural food. Dogs, of course, you can give them a mix of multiple foods, chicken, meats, vegetables, all of these things. And some people do give rice, which is okay, but depending on the allergies your dogs have, depending on the weight of your dog, depending on the purpose of what food you're giving. But ideally, a mix between processed and home food is the best. I mean, if you can do home food entirely, great, but out of convenience, processed foods is okay.
Got it. So on the line of giving your dogs home foods, I think there are a lot of people who have questions of what kind of home foods they can give, right? So I made a list of some of the most commonly again asked questions. I think you already covered one of them, and which was rice. So you mentioned that rice depends on the types of allergies the dogs have. So we can move past that one. So let's say chapati. Is it fine to give your dogs chapati?
Again, it is fine to give them chapati, but a lot of dogs and humans nowadays are allergic to gluten. So surprisingly, dogs also have gotten this allergy, and chapati is one of the things that do contain gluten, or say if you're allergic to wheat, but that is more on the allergy basis. But yeah, if you give an option of chapati and bread, for weight wise, chapati is better.
Is it okay to give your dog soya?
It is okay, because like I mentioned, that soya is one of the fillers used in these processed foods, but again, not in large quantities. So a lot of people who are vegetarians prefer to give soya over chicken and all of that. Again, because of sentimental issues, we can't really force them to do anything, but you can give them. It is some sort of protein, but again, not in large quantities.
Is it fine to give the yolk of an egg?
It is. So the yolk of the egg is mostly fat. So it is fine. So a lot of these topics are sensitive when it comes to fatty foods, because a lot of dogs or cats can process, and a lot of them cannot, because it becomes a bit too much for them, and then they end up getting diarrhea. So if you want to experiment these things, yes, it's absolutely fine to give them. In fact, if you show your cat a boiled egg, a boiled yolk, they will leave the white of the egg and they will eat only the yolk of the egg. This is what I've noticed in most cats. But dogs will eat the whole thing. But in case your dog begins to get diarrhea, then you know, okay, my dog cannot handle that much of fat. So then in those cases, you can't. So ideally, maybe say 1 yolk, maximum 2 yolks a day is okay. Again, the tinier the dog, be a little bit more careful with it. The older the dog, the better they can handle it.
Got it. And we have an odd one over here. Is it okay to give your dogs fenugreek leaves?
So surprisingly, it is actually okay to give your dog fenugreek leaves. Again, not in large quantities, but it does have certain properties that do improve their coat, their skin texture, and everything. So so when you add all these other ingredients which are not meat, not the basic foods of animals, like a lot of people add haldi and all that, yeah, but when they ask you how much, it's just like how we add for humans. It's just a pinch. You just add a little bit, just for, of course, not for the flavor for them, but just for the effect for them. But you can put a little bit.
All right. And I think there's 2 more major ones, and I think the first one is it's going to be fine. I think we should keep that in the video. So I think one of the most common things that people feed their dogs is milk. And a lot of people say it's not good, it's lactose intolerant, and some say it's fine. So, what is the right answer for milk?
Again, so this is a very controversial topic, and a lot of people may not agree with me. So it is true that they do lack the enzyme to convert lactose and all of that. But again, now all of these things have been researched and found out now. It's like this generation ka thing. So when you go back and you look at, okay, I'm not even talking about prehistoric times, I'm talking about like 10, 20 years ago. Dogs ate everything. Dogs drank everything. There was no problem with it. Unless, of course, you react to it, then there's a problem with it. So they do theoretically lack the enzyme, theoretically, and of course, they done research about it. But a lot of dogs do handle milk well. So ideally, when there is something like this, I normally advise people that once you have your pet, first of all, whenever you're starting any new foods, whatever it may be, milk, meat, whatever it may be, always observe your dog for the next 1 week. So say now I tell them, okay, you can give milk. First of all, you always, so the fat content of cow's milk is higher than what a dog would normally be suckling from its own mother. So ideally you use the milk with the least fat content, or you can either boil the milk, remove the top layer of cream. Then you dilute the milk and you first offer your dog a little bit of that. So if you feel like your dog is digesting it well, does not have diarrhea, does not vomit after that, after drinking it for a couple of days, then you're good to go. But a lot of dogs react very badly, so then you don't. The same goes with cats.
Right. And I think on the topic of meat, is it fine to give the bones of, let's say, chicken to your dogs, or is it not safe? What are the risks giving bones to your pet?
So again, with bones, the thing is that if I go back to the previous generations where research wasn't done, bones was a main thing in their food. And nowadays I've come across a lot of pet parents who are so scared of giving bones that they don't give anything. And unfortunately, to combat that, we have to surgically clean their teeth, which is literally like bones. So the thing is, when you give bones to a dog, it does two things. It helps them to clean their teeth, and it also helps them to kind of file them down because they are constantly gnawing on it. Like when you have a pup who's just teething, you always give them something hard to bite because their gums are paining. And they're getting to file their teeth. So in this way, bones do clean. They help clean their teeth. But now when it comes to chicken bones, it's a bit controversial because a lot of chicken bones, they tend to crack, they tend to splinter when dogs eat them, or even if they don't crack or splinter, dogs sometimes tend to swallow them whole. So what I recommend people to do nowadays is you can either give the cartilage, or you can give, say, really, 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 really well pressure cooked bones, so that, even if they do break them, they are soft, so that they don't really splinter or poke anything. And never really give, just like, you get these chunks which are like just blobs. They can't really like chew them. But yeah, it's okay to give softer bones, but I wouldn't recommend to give like the harder, really hard bones. If you're giving bones or not, check your dog's teeth for tartar or for any fractures or any damage to their teeth.
Got it. So since you discussed so many different types of food, what's the one thing you would say should be a staple in any dog's diet?
Meat.
Got it. Right. And to end this discussion on food, I guess the last question would be, how often should you feed your dogs in a day?
So I would say the minimum is twice a day, because a lot of people I know sometimes feed once a day. They think that, okay, I'll give my dog a larger quantity of food and I think that's enough, but it's not. So normally if you keep your dog, your cat, even yourself hungry for more than 9 hours at a stretch, you're probably going to get acidity. If not right then and there, you're going to get it in the long run. So your stomach wasn't meant to be empty at any point of time. It needs acids. So acids are corrosive, and if you don't put something there for the acids to work on, they're going to work on your own body. So you're going to get acidity, you're going to have a lot of gastric problems. So if you can feed your pet thrice a day, that's great. Or if you really can't and you want to feed them twice a day, fine. And when I say feed, I mean like 2 main meals. Other than that, of course, you can also give them a little bit of snacks and stuff like that. But yeah, main meals should be 2.
Got it.
Minimum.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So I think these are the most questions we took out from our pet community forum. So to conclude the interview, I think the first thing I'll ask you is, in your experience as a vet and learning about veterinary, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to any pet parent out there?
The one piece of advice I would give to a pet parent, if you feel something is wrong with your dog, or if you feel like, okay, my dog's not in today and this is not his normal self, please don't wait for 4 or 5 days until they've not eaten and then go and expect the vet to work miracles, because it doesn't work like that. If your own child was sick for more than a day, I'm pretty sure you would look after them like they're your own children. So if your pets are in your house, treat them like your own children as well, and don't ignore them. Don't ignore signs that aren't normal. Don't ignore behaviors that aren't normal. Okay, maybe a day, but don't go more than a day. Always consult your vet. Even if you can't take them in, at least call them up or online consult or something, but ask and see.
Got it. And to move away to focus more on the vet as a career choice, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to anyone trying to pursue a career in veterinary?
The one piece of advice. So to be a vet, I personally think that now I joined veterinary like 11 years ago. Yeah. So to be a vet back then, it was kind of like we were probably 5 or 6 people who genuinely came to do veterinary. The rest of them came because they didn't get MBBS. So if you're coming for that purpose, I would suggest you can do probably anything, because nowadays I think you're actually robbing people's seats, because now people who want to be vets it's increasing. But to be a vet, you need to, I would say, probably intern with a vet before you actually make that decision, or if not intern, at least go and observe a few cases, see whether you can actually handle blood, if you can actually handle, animals in pain. Because a lot of people love animals, and I get it, I love animals too. But when it comes to them being in pain, a lot of people said, oh my God, I can't. But that is the purpose of a vet. You're supposed to be able to see an animal in pain and make them better. So you need to literally have the heart of a lion and the hands of a princess, because when you're working with pets, you can't be rough. So you got to have very delicate hands, but your heart needs to be like really firm, because you're going to see the worst things in your life.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Yep. And to end this interview, if there's anything you want to plug, you mentioned you're opening your own clinic. So if you want to talk a bit about that, and if people want to are in Goa, how can they find you and reach you?
So I've not yet opened my clinic, but I am practicing out of it during certain times of the day. So it's in Panjim. I think probably the only now in central Panjim. So it's if anyone wants, they can obviously like take my contact from y'all, or you can follow me on Instagram as the Goan Traveling Vet. And I do house calls as well still, but to certain limited areas. But once my clinic is open, it will be up. But you can always contact me and I'll tell you where it is. It's right in the heart of Panjim. So.
Got it. And for anyone who is contacting Dr. Sasha and is working with her, like we said, since we are Pet Perfect and we have a pet community, we'll give her a coupon code, and she can give them to you if they contact you and they ask you for your advice, etc. And they'll give us free access to our app as well. And yeah, to conclude again, thank you so much, doctor, for taking the time. It's actually, people don't know, it's almost 11 o'clock right now in the night, and she still agreed to do the interview, so that's great. So thank you. And if there's any parting words you want to say, I think now's the right time.
Any parting words? I would just say this is a great whole thing that's created, and kudos to y'all, and thank you so much for having me as your first vet on an interview. And I really hope that this interview helps a lot of people with small little questions that they have. And I do hope that people take some advice that I gave home. Choose your pets well, and think twice, thrice, 4 times before you actually decide that you want to get a pet, because it's not a walk in the park. It's a lot of work. So if you're gonna commit to one, you gotta commit to one properly. So.
Got it. All right. And with that note, I guess we can complete the interview. Again, thank you, and I hope everyone who watched us had a great time. And if you have any other questions, you can always ping Dr. Sasha directly, or you can leave a comment to us and we'll follow up with you on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.